Trump is slamming the investigation into collusion between his campaign and Russia. This after the Washington Post reported that special counsel Robert Mueller is investigating the president for possible obstruction of justice. CNN's Athena Jones is live at the White House with all of the latest. What have you learned, Athena?
Good morning, Allison. Well, we know that the president has been frustrated and continues to be frustrated about these investigations and is clearly not happy with this latest report out of the Washington Post. He took to Twitter early this morning, just before 7 o'clock, tweeting, "They made up a phony collusion with the Russians story, found zero proof, so now they go for obstruction of justice on the phony story." Nice. That tweet, I should mention, is very much in line with Republican National Committee talking points. And just a few minutes ago, he tweeted again saying, "You are witnessing the single greatest witch hunt in American political history, led by some very bad and conflicted people. Hashtag Make America Great Again." Of course, notice that witch hunt in all caps. Bottom line here is this is not the best birthday present for President Trump. This is exactly the sort of headline, the headline that Bob Mueller is now looking into possible obstruction of justice by the president. This is the kind of storyline he's been trying so much to avoid. You'll remember it was just last week that President Trump and his legal team were saying he had been completely and totally vindicated, pointing to fired FBI Director Jim Comey's testimony that he had told the president on 3 separate occasions that he himself was not personally under investigation. This latest report by the Post shows that that is all changed. This is a very big deal. And I should mention that Special Counsel Mueller is set to meet soon with top intelligence chiefs. In addition to meeting with those intelligence chiefs, he met yesterday with the chair and vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee to talk about these investigations. Allison, Chris.
Okay, Athena, thank you very much for all of that reporting. Let's bring in our panel to discuss it. We have CNN political director David Chalian, CNN political analyst Jackie Kucinich, and CNN legal analyst Paul Callan. Great to see all of you. David Chalian. Again, the president's tweets this morning were not the unity that some, perhaps on Capitol Hill, were hoping for in terms of a message, but you get it. President Trump doesn't like this investigation, and he has pressed people time and again to say that he is not under investigation, that he is not the target of. He mentioned this, as we all recall, on NBC with Lester Holt. Let's play a moment of that.
I know that I'm not under investigation, me personally. I'm not talking about campaigns. I'm not talking about anything else. I'm not under investigation.
Okay. Now, the irony, of course, David, is that this morning something has shifted, and possibly by exerting as much pressure as he has to officials to ensure that he's not under investigation, now the Washington Post says Bob Mueller may be investigating him.
Right. I mean, the moment he fired Jim Comey, this development, which is huge, but it's as inevitable as it is huge, that indeed this investigation would be open. So now we have the President of the United States under investigation. And it begs the question, Allison, to your point, he spent so much time over the course of the last several months, both privately with players and publicly as a PR strategy, to constantly stress that he's not under investigation. Of course, he is now under investigation. So what did that get him? That constant pushback on this notion that he wasn't under investigation for collusion, it drove him so mad about this that he now is indeed under investigation for possible obstruction of justice.
Paul, 2 questions for you. The first one is, are you surprised that Mueller would be looking at possible obstruction under the facts as we understand them?
No, I'm not at all surprised about that because, you know, if obstruction of justice is a cliff, the president walked over to the precipice of that cliff when he fired Director Comey. It looked suspicious. It looked like, why would you demand the guy's loyalty? And then when he didn't, publicly say that you were not under investigation, you fire him, even though previously you had no problem with him. It looks bad. So I'm not surprised that Mueller would be taking a look at this as part of his greater investigation.
Well,
so
I mean,
nothing surprising to me
just
here.
to press back on you, Ken Starr, obviously former independent counsel during the Lewinsky scandal, he just said that this does not meet the legal threshold of nothing that he has seen. There's been no evidence that he has seen presented that would meet the legal threshold of obstruction of justice, because even the president saying to James Comey, I hope that you can let the Michael Flynn thing go, he says is open to interpretation. It's a suggestion. that is not obstruction of justice.
Well, I would agree with Kenneth Starr in that if there is an obstruction case here, it's an extremely weak case. It's not the kind of case that could be won in a criminal prosecution. And by the way, you can't prosecute the president criminally while he's a sitting president.
But looking at it is different than that.
Yes.
I mean, Ken Starr prefaced this statement by saying it's too early to tell. You know, and that's
what he's seen thus far.
That's where it is. But I mean, that's the point. He doesn't know. He doesn't have any sense of it. And that's good guidance for everybody. And it takes me to what my second question was, which is the president isn't saying, I didn't obstruct justice. He isn't saying, I don't like this investigation. He goes much farther. He says it's all phony. It's made up. He talks about they. He denigrates the investigation. He denigrates the people involved by calling it a witch hunt and saying led by some bad people. Bad and conflicted. Is that the right way to respond in terms of respecting the process, even if you don't agree with it?
No, it's a ridiculous way to respond, and it's going to get him into trouble because, and he's done this before with his personal attacks on the judiciary, who were deciding his travel ban case. And guess what? The courts threw the travel ban out. Now he's going after the investigators and accusing them of being somehow corrupt or improper in the way they're handling the investigation. You're going to make these people angry, and it's just not a good tactic. I think in the end, if he just backs off and lets Mueller complete his investigation, it probably won't go anywhere. He's got a good chance. I mean, what are the chances that a Republican Congress is going to vote to impeach the President of the United States, a Republican president?
Nil.
It's like zero, okay? So that's where this obstruction case is ultimately going. So the President should go back to doing his work and forget about Mueller.
Okay, so Jackie, all of this is set against the backdrop of the tragedy that happened yesterday and the calls on Capitol Hill for unity from Republicans and from Democrats, everybody redoubling their efforts to see each other as human beings and to all sort of be for one. So what will they do? What will lawmakers do? What will Congress do? I mean, other than these nice words that are heartening, what action are they talking about? What happens next?
Well, they've been talking about reducing the rhetoric and how they treat each other. And I imagine they just start ignoring the president because his tweets this morning show that he's not going to do that. He's referring to bad and conflicted people. And so I think, you know, this sort of thing is going to pull his party further away from him because they're not in this headspace right now. They're thinking about their colleague who was shot yesterday. And, you know, the more that the president starts to stew in his own anger over something like this, the White House says they want to move on. They say they want to move on with their agenda and they want to deal with tax reform. They want to deal with health care. The president himself isn't allowing them to move on because he is so fixated on this Russia investigation. And that's going to isolate him and the White House down the line.
I mean, look. We got two important time markers here. We're right at about 24 hours since we learned and started covering the shooting here, David Chalian, and I think we're at the 2-year mark of when Donald Trump got into the game to be president.
Tomorrow, right?
And
he rode down the escalator.
I think
it's
we're
tomorrow,
right there, right? So we have these, you know, this confluence of momentous events, and there's no question that this is a time that you take stock and you think about how you do things. And there's no question that people on the right were trying to play what happened yesterday to political advantage and blaming the left. But the president to come out of the box with these two tweets this morning after calling for unity last night, how is that a consistent message?
Well, it's not a consistent message, although in the president's mind, you know, he's being consistent in his pushback on the Russia investigation. And I agree with you. I thought the president struck precisely the right notes yesterday when he addressed the country in the aftermath of this. It really was an important reminder that everyone in this town comes to this call of service through a love of country. And so I thought that was an important reminder. But I also think we shouldn't fool ourselves to thinking that this one terrible incident is going to undo what has been, you know, a couple decades worth now of a real coarsening of American political discourse. I don't think that's realistic. I agree with you, Chris, that it is a moment to take stock. But I think that we are fooling ourselves if we think that all of a sudden there's going to be a kumbaya sensibility
the proof
for
is in the
long-lasting
tweets
here in Washington.
You know, he called it a witch hunt again. He called the people doing it bad. He denigrated an institution again.
Right, but lawmakers are trying to have a different tone this morning. I mean, it is a real divide.
This is the top lawmaker. This is the top of the food chain, the President of the United States.
I get it, and you can argue that the tone is set at the top. But we'll see today. You know, we'll see today what the lawmakers say as they head into this unified baseball game that they're trying. Panel, thank you very much.
Tonight should be special, and we do hope they raise more money than ever. You can Google Congressional Baseball Game. You'll figure out how you can donate. The money goes to needy kids. So